Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name is Glenn Keller, and in this demonstration, we are talking about interacting with data in the system. And so far, we've looked at everything from finding the data to creating new data through manual processes, through drag and drop. We have edited the data, we've associated files to it, we've removed files from it, and we have taken it through a release process to look at different permissions and how revision rules interact with the data. In this demonstration, we are taking a look at a couple of additional use cases with data. Those use cases are going to be just how can we quickly find data that we were working with before, and then also getting into managing the ownership of data and really looking at some details about it. As we go into this, we're going to just kind of talk about those different aspects of working with the data. And then we're going to get into things like what can we do to the data and how can we share it out to other users. So to begin with, we've been working as this user 01 individual, and just as we've been working, we have this assistant that's available on the left-hand side. This is going to show me buttons and stuff that I've used before, and it will show me also the new components that I've created down in my recent objects. Make sure that you pull this drop-down down. You do have access to like Team Recent, Favorites, and Clipboard. But I'm going to go ahead and open that object up that I had just created. So I'm using that assistant as a way to access previous objects, but I could have searched for it if I knew the ID. And then I've got the object listed here. Now I can see that the object itself, if I look at it, is owned by me, user 01. But I have just created the object, but user 02 asked me to create that as a part of the task, and I really need user 02 to own that data. So I can change the ownership of the data, which changes the subsequent permissions to the data that somebody may have in the system. Your organization may have it set up to where everybody within the same group has the same permissions to something, but you could also have additional permissions if you are the owning user of that data. So in this scenario, if I need to make somebody else the owning user, I basically just need to stand on the data and have permissions to do so. Come over to the right-hand side, and in here you can see change owner is an option. We've spoken about add to favorites, pin to home, submit to workflow. The next one in sequence is going to be this change owner. If I pick this, then I could come in and I could pick any number of users from the system. I'm going to choose user 02 in this case. And then notice if I scroll down, I could go to the related objects, expand the tree in here, and I could say only the top level object is going to be transferred ownership. I could individually unselect certain components if I only want one or two components to be transferred. In this case, I'm going to do them all. I'm going to click change, and you'll notice that one component was not changed because I don't have permission, but the one I'm standing on was changed. So if I close this and close this little warning here, go back from there to overview again, now you'll be able to see that the owning user is still 02. So what didn't change is if I go to attachments and I switch to this tree or table layout and scroll to the right, I should have the owning user. And one of them, this PDF at the bottom, was owned by an administrative user and therefore did not get updated because I didn't have permissions to change ownership on that object. Now that it is user 02 in InfoDBA, if I pick this again and come into manage, change owner, and then I switch it back to myself and hit change. Notice that it wasn't changed at all in this case again, but let's go ahead and validate that. I know that it didn't update the page because user 02 is still here. And if I close it, close my error, and then deselect it, and then select it again. So we'll just kind of pick off of it, pick back on it. You'll see that it's still owned by 0202. So if I go to attachments, you can see that the owning user on the cells here are still 0202. So the moment I let this go and I change the ownership to somebody else, it also changed the permissions in the system that I have on that component. So only user 02 now has ownership permissions to it and can actually change who owns what components. So changing ownership, you can do it to a lot of different objects at the same time, as long as you have those permissions. And if you think you need them and you don't have them, definitely take a look at your business practices and speak with your SMEs. Now, the object is here. It's owned by O2. And on that object, just note that we can take a look at the object and the previous object in one fell swoop. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy this object. So it's basically copying a shortcut. I use the copy command in the top corner. And then I'm going to go into my Explorer and paste it next to my other object. So I'll right click and choose paste. And then if I expand this out a little bit, you can see I've got 2 of the finger clamps. So at this point, it didn't paste because it was already in there, but I've got 2 of the finger clamps. And at this point, if I control select them or shift select them, I can get them next to each other and I can compare the differences in that overarching metadata. And I could use the little gear here to say arrange, and I could add additional columns to this table to see any additional information I may want to compare. Also note that you could go to the relations tree, and as long as you only have one selected, you can see the relationships. You just can't compare those relationships between the two. Finally, in addition to changing objects, accessing with your assistant, you can also run reports on these objects. Now, there are a lot of out-of-the-box reports that are available to the system. What we're talking about here are called item reports. And just note that when you have an object selected, if you right-click, you don't have this option, okay? You have to go to the right-hand toolbar, to the New, and notice there's a Generate Report option. So if I select that, then I have a whole bunch of different reports that I can interact with. So this may be a lot or it may be a little depending on what your configurators have done. But in this case, if I do something like a Workspace object print summary, then it will select a template for me. And this is just kind of what it's going to look like when it comes out, what language I want it, and then I optionally can save it to a file. So I can say finger clamp report. And then I could run it in the background if I have background processes in place. If I don't, I could just hit generate here and it'll just run for a second until it's done. In this case, it downloaded it again to my browser. I'm going to hit keep, go to the folder, and I can see the report opens up as a Chrome document, and it'll open up like this. So I've generated the report here. And then if I go to my new stuff, notice that the new report is going to be right here. It's this HTML report because I chose to save it as a file. So in this case, I'm going to go back to details and the report will actually be down below. So you can create reports against this data. There are different types of reports, everything from sign-off to bill of material reports that you can generate. Another example of a type of report that you can run is, let me go ahead and get an assembly up. So I'll open up my cutting head assembly. So I've got this here. If I open it, I can see that there is a structure to this component. So I can see a lot of data underneath of it. And if I come over to the right-hand side and say generate new, generate report, I could do a BOM report, BOM readiness, BOM PR report. I could do just a BOM structure report, which is what I'm going to do. I could say, do I want it to pack any lines? Yes, I do. I want to see it in the latest released configuration, or do I want to see it in the latest any status working configuration. So show me anything that's released, and if not released, show me the working ones. I could pick my look and feel of this. So I'm going to do HTML in this case. I could also just do this one. And then I'm going to say HTML BOM report cutting head. So in this case, I'm going to hit generate. It will take a couple of seconds longer than the other one. Some reports are fairly large and they will take a little bit of time. But you can see in this case, the report opens and it's got a pretty good definition of all of those components in it, as well as some key attributes across the top like item ID and rev, name, description, etc. So reports can be run and executed against this data to show you everything from relational data to information about its assembly data and whatnot. Just notice that if I come to Explorer, that new stuff folder contains the newly generated cutting head report, and I could come view it here as well, but that's again because I picked to save as a new file. And the new stuff folder is just where things get created if it hasn't been told where to create it first. So this has been another demonstration on just kind of working with data inside of the Active Workspace environment. This is the last of our little prequel videos on this. In the future, we'll be using other use cases such as workflows or structures to kind of guide us through and see different iterations of how we can work with this data.